Hi, welcome to the Carnivore Stories podcast with me, Alyssa Grubner. The carnivore way of eating completely transformed my life, and it's stories just like the ones you'll hear on this podcast that kept me going every step of the way. I hope you're ready to hear an inspirational carnivore story. I know I am, but first, let me tell you about the Meat-tastic t-shirts I have for sale on my spring store. It's a great opportunity for you to become a walking billboard if that's what you're into. And it's a great opportunity for you to support your new favorite podcast. You can find a link to the spring store in my bio on Instagram at Meat, M-E-A-T, Mrs. M-R-S, Grubs, G-R-U-B-S. I'll also put a link to the store in this video's description on YouTube. So check it out and get some carnivore swag. This is episode 28 of the Carnivore Stories podcast. Today, I'm joined by Deborah Declue. She's a wife, mother, content creator, and restaurant server living in Asheville, North Carolina. You can find her on Instagram and YouTube at The Catholic Carnivore. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I love your podcast.
Thank you. Wow, I'm flattered. Okay, well, you know the drill. So, can you tell everyone when you found carnivore and what brought you to this way of eating?
Sure. So I believe I started hearing about carnivore a few months or maybe longer before I started it, but it was always just in passing. I think my husband mentioned it when he was listening to Jordan Peterson, who he loves, and I just thought it sounded crazy. And I thought it sounded crazy, even though we were on a ketogenic diet at the time that I remember hearing about it. But it was about May of this year that I really started to kind of look into it out of desperation. And then I started it pretty full on in June. So I've been doing carnivore, what I call relaxed carnivore. Not strict. It's not just meat, salt, water, or anything like that. I've been doing that since June. So like 6 months. Yeah. Basically, I've had a very long history of having a different diet than most people, trying different diets, and it progressing from gluten-free, starting in my early 30s, to paleo, and then keto, and then now carnivore. But I started looking into food sensitivities and stuff like that in my early 30s because I had these ongoing issues that just kept getting worse as I got older. And they had started around adolescence, like age 13. So when my hormones were changing, is when I started having a lot of symptoms. But unfortunately, at that time, which was like the 90s, there wasn't a lot of awareness about true health and diet and that kind of thing. And I guess I grew up thinking food was mostly for pleasure and social, situations. Food was very important in my family because my mom was Italian. And in that, in that kind of culture, food is the way you show love. And a lot of it is bread and pasta and sugar and that kind of thing. So that's just that was my normal. My grandparents owned a bakery in New Jersey, and I always heard about the bakery growing up. And, it was just normal. Everybody in my family was addicted to bread and cheese and sugar. So I did like a lot of different foods when I was a child. And so I was unusual in that way. I wasn't a picky eater. And so I would get a lot of like attention for that because I liked funnily enough, I liked raw meat, which I would steal from the kitchen when my mom was making dinner. And I liked raw oysters. And everybody just thought that was so bizarre for a young child. But it was
Yeah.
like I would just get
Yeah.
so excited if we went to a seafood restaurant. I would get so excited to order the raw oysters and I would eat the whole thing. It was like my body was craving. I don't know what it is in the oysters, iron or zinc or something.
Mhm.
So I always was borderline anemic. I think my mom always told me that. The doctors would always say, like, she needs more iron. And that just kind of persisted into adulthood. And I would try to eat more meat, but it didn't work. And then, so around 13 is when I started to have fatigue issues. And it was very debilitating, I would say. Um, I had a very difficult time waking up to go to school, and my mom would have to physically like force me out of bed. And she did think it was weird that I would sleep till like 1 p.m. on the weekends, but she just didn't do anything about it. I think she was just busy and
Mhm.
she was distracted mom, and she didn't take her to a doctor. She just thought I was sleepy, like she's like, oh, she's my sleepy one. She loves to sleep. She loves to sleep. And I was her shy kid. And really that was anxiety. And that wasn't addressed either. So, there's a lot of that goes on where we just kind of make excuses for stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but it became a problem. And in high school, I was falling asleep in classes, and I was unable to really function because I was so tired all the time. And it didn't matter how much sleep I got, I would still be tired and fall asleep. And still, this wasn't really addressed. And you learn to live with it and it becomes normal. But it started to become even worse of a problem when I was working, like when I was working through college and then trying to complete college classes. I couldn't stay awake. And then, that's going to cause your grades to go down. And then I was not able to get up in time to get to work on time. So then I would be late. These really, it really affected my life. But for whatever reason, I did not think to go to a doctor or ask why this was happening. Um, and then later over the years, some people would say, hey, you should get like a sleep study done. Maybe you have like, narcolepsy or something.
Mhm.
But I never did anything about it. I definitely drank coffee starting around 13 to try to cope with that. But it wasn't until maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that I finally went and got a sleep study done. And they said that I had what's called idiopathic hypersomnia, which is what Michaela Peterson was diagnosed with, same symptoms. And basically, it's just we don't know why you're so tired, but this is what we call it. It's not narcolepsy. It's not sleep apnea, but it's just excessive daytime sleepiness. And they have a medication that they give you that you can take that is called modafinil. And so I took it because it got so much worse. And it was really impossible for me not to fall asleep for a few hours every day. And that's hard when you're a mom and all that. So the medication helped greatly. But all I know is that was one of the major things that carnivore just seemed to completely obliterate um, that symptom. And I didn't need the medication anymore. And I can't take it anymore. If I take that medication, it feels like I'm on, speed. That's not what it felt like when I took it. It just made me function, and stay awake. But I can't take that now with the diet. It just fixed that fatigue like completely, which is amazing. It's miraculous to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I was like, you got to be kidding me. All I had to do was not eat like all these carbs and just eat meat. Um,
Mhm.
and that wasn't the only thing that it healed. I also had pretty bad social anxiety and depression. for decades. And I took quite a few different antidepressants since I was about 20 years old, and had nightmare experiences with some of them. Weaned myself off some of them with really great difficulty, and just had a love-hate relationship with those. I'm not somebody that thinks they're just evil or terrible and nobody should ever take them. I actually felt like once I found the one that worked for me, which was Zoloft, I felt like, okay, works pretty good. I don't have, some of the terrible side effects some people do. So I was kind of like thinking, okay, if I have to take this the rest of my life, I'm not going to be upset about it. But it took me like years to get to that point. For years, I was constantly trying to get off or not be addicted to them or whatever. Like it was difficult, but I ended up getting prescribed the Zoloft for like a third time, like 3 years ago, because my hormones were completely a mess and probably always have been. And it started to get really bad around age 40. And they just tell you, oh, you're just in perimenopause. That's normal. And I was like, but this is not normal. Like, I don't know anybody that has the extreme symptoms I have. And they would be like, well, does this run in your family? Oh, yeah, it does. and I'm like, yeah, but my mom had a hysterectomy. Like my mom, I don't want to end up like my mom. Like, why am I even having this conversation with a doctor? Like, I'm 41 years old and I don't want to have to think about having a hysterectomy because I'm in so much misery. She's like, and so my doctor was like, well, I said, I think, I would Google things because I would have all this time when I was like sick in bed, all this time. It basically, I would have PMS that would last for 2 weeks. And the PMS was so severe that I would be like in bed most of the time. It was very detrimental for my marriage and my kids. It was very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I ended up going back on the Zoloft. And, some people don't know that is the treatment for extreme PMS. It's called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And my doctor said, I think you have that based on everything you're reporting to me. She said, normally we could just put you on Zoloft for that, or I can refer you to an endocrinologist. And I said, okay, fine, just give me the Zoloft. And I was shocked. It really did help. And so I thought, I'm going to have to be on this for ever. And it's a part of me just was so angry about that, but then I just let it go. And it really did help, but I decided when I was doing carnivore, because carnivore for some reason just totally shifted something in me mentally or emotionally, like where I could tell I had a completely different mindset once I got into the ketosis. And I can't explain that part. It's easy to say, oh, like my blood sugars are better and my blood pressure is better and all this, but saying that like my mindset changed just sounds crazy, but that's what happened. And I was just like, knew that
I think I think it sounds crazy to people who haven't experienced it, but listening to you, I know exactly what you're talking about.
What I'm talking about.
I experienced the same thing. Yeah.
Right. Well, I just was always like negative. Like my whole life, I struggled with the negative kind of mentality. Like I would always focus on the negative, or I was just sort of grumpy, or you know what I mean? Like I had a lot of intruding almost thoughts that were negative, that I would be like, that's not true. Like stop believing that. But then it would just be there, and it was like something not in my control that just kind of went away. Like now it's like I'm not in this battle with my mind all the time. I can just, I don't know how to explain it. It's very, very cool. But I just knew once that shift happened that I was not going to stay on the Zoloft, and that I was not going to let myself stay on the Zoloft, and I don't need it. I just knew like, okay, this, I could sense that I was not nourished before this, and that my brain felt like it was getting this oxygen or this nourishment or these signals that it never got. And I was like, I'm going to start to get off this Zoloft. I just don't care how hard it is. I'm going to do it. So I started weaning off that probably in July or August. And then, so it's been a really long, slow weaning, and I wasn't on a huge dose at all. It was like 50 milligrams, but I have not taken it in 3 days. So I'm experiencing a little bit of nausea, and that's probably going to turn into some headaches and some brain zaps and all that. But I've done enough experience. I know enough to know that it's going to pass and I'm going to be okay. And I trust that, my brain is going to adjust and everything's going to be okay. But it's a big deal for me, to get off the Zoloft. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is exciting. So how long after you went carnivore did you start to experience relief from the idiopathic hypersomnia?
I don't remember exactly. I just know it was within 60 days, I would say.
Okay.
I had
Okay,
a really
wow.
rough time with the transition. My keto flu was pretty bad. It lasted for about 21 days, but I did not know about electrolytes, and I wasn't staying on top of that. And then I learned later that that could have been a harder, longer transition for me because one of my major symptoms was always hypoglycemia. I would get low blood sugar episodes, and they were getting more frequent. My dad had type 2 diabetes. And so I think I was in pre-diabetes stage is what was happening when I went into carnivore. And that also completely went away within the 60 days. But yeah, I just was not taking the Provigil and see how I do, and I would not get the tiredness, and I would just have stable energy all day. And then my blood sugar being stable was just such a relief because it's a very exhausting cycle where you're constantly like, oh, do I have a snack so I don't get low blood sugar? Because it would be concerning. I
Yeah.
would be unable to move or, take care of myself if and it would just switch. And like 1 minute I could be fine. And then 1 minute later, I could be like, I need some juice or something. So I hated that. So that was like
Yeah.
amazing when that stopped. And then I also had this issue with like blood pressure, low blood pressure, which I think you had the opposite, the high blood
Yes, opposite. Yeah, the exact opposite.
pressure. Yeah, mine was
Yeah.
always so low that they thought I was like dead when they check me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the hypoglycemia because before coming to keto or carnivore, I had started to experience that same thing, and I had no idea what it was at the time.
What
I
it
thought I
was.
was just like dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. Um, but I'm sure I was in the pre-diabetic or maybe even diabetic range at the time because I think 6 months into low carb and keto, I finally got a blood glucose monitor,
Oh,
and
yeah.
my fasting blood sugar, it was like in the like over 110 in the morning. So, and I would assume that it had lowered from whatever it was before
Wow.
me being six
Yeah.
months on keto. Um, and then going into carnivore, that totally my fasting blood sugar started to be like in the 80s, sometimes high 70s, pretty consistently.
Mm, that's awesome. I still haven't gotten a monitor. I want to do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's cool to look at
yeah.
sometimes, like, okay, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm kind of like now I don't check so often because it's like, okay, well, I don't know what any data would really make me do anything differently
I
at
know.
this point because I'm feeling so much better. Um, okay, so you said you had a hard time adapting. You had keto flu. How did you find out that you needed to add in more electrolytes?
I don't know. I don't know if I found that out until later. Like after I went through that, um, I sadly just didn't know when I was going through it what it was. I just suffered
Okay.
through it. But I think when you have so much chronic suffering anyway, then you're just like, oh, I just got to get through it. I mean, I just thought for I don't know, it was brutal. It was brutal, and we just kept drinking water. I just kept drinking lots of water, but I didn't put any like
Okay.
electrolytes in it, so I was just flushing out like all these electrolytes and stuff.
Yeah.
But apparently,
Um,
like it can take longer for someone who has, who's pre-diabetic or has blood sugar issues. It can take them longer to get into ketosis, and it can be really uncomfortable. So I felt very
yes.
weak and tired and dizzy. I just felt it was bad, but I just trusted it was going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Faith is a big thing. I feel like when
Yeah.
first even trying this crazy carnivore thing, and your name, Catholic Carnivore, has faith,
Yeah,
your
it's true.
Catholic faith been a big part of this whole journey for you?
Um, yeah, I got the idea to do a channel. I don't know. I felt like it was just what I was supposed to do after I kind of had this awakening when everything started disappearing and all of these problems I had started disappearing. I was in such shock from it. And I love to listen to other carnivores and people's success stories. Like, I just love that. And I was listening to an interview with the Black carnivore. Do you know her?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. A
she's
day
cool.
fox.
Yeah, I couldn't remember her name, but I just thought, oh, that's cool. That's cool. She's like the Black carnivore, and she like is all about like helping people in her world to understand and carnivore and
Mhm.
why it could help them. And I just woke up one day and I was like, why don't my Catholic friends and more Christians talk about this? Why aren't more people aware of how amazing this is? Because we all know people who are sick, who have so many struggles,
Yeah.
and there's just so much confusion about how to deal with those things. And I just thought, well, I can't just go about my life now after this happened without telling people. It feels weird sometimes when you tell people and you don't want to be annoying, but I know that every time I listen to other people's stories, I just find them so inspiring. And I just think, wow, even if that person's story just helps one person, it's important. And even if I feel like, well, my story's not that great, it's not like I healed cancer or something, I still think it's important, and every person's story is impactful. And so I do also think there's a lot of similarities and parallels with this. Sounds bad, but I don't mean it in a bad way, but like, with religion, you can get kind of legalistic or you can go the opposite direction. And I see some of that in the carnivore like space,
Mhm.
like where there's just like the way people are. It's just so funny. It's like, oh, well, you're not carnivore if you don't just eat meat, salt, and water. And then
Right.
people get like all, you know, legalistic about it. And I just think, oh no, like you can't be like that. Like you can't be like a Pharisee when it comes to diet. And I
Mhm.
actually think that's one of the reasons sometimes you see Christians steer away from diets or whatever because they feel like
Yeah.
it's too dogmatic or it's too, you're putting food like way too high up. And I get that. And I think there's reasons they think that. But um I think that doesn't mean you just throw the whole thing out. Like you should throw out
Yeah.
the fact that
Well,
maybe this is the best diet for us just because there's some nutsos that
right.
say
Well,
things that
Deborah,
are. Mhm.
you reference in your Instagram bio Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and it's talking about, to not conform to, what everybody else in the world is doing. And I feel like that really like you're talking about the parallels between like religion and diet, but I feel like that really highlights like the rest of the world is eating junk. The rest of the world is eating all of these things that are making us sick, that was
Hmm.
keeping you sleepy, that was keeping my blood pressure high.
Yeah.
And and my sister, my little sister, was just over the weekend, and I was talking to her because she's really big in church, and I was saying, um, we have to take care of our bodies. God doesn't want us to be sick. And, that's one of the things. The rest of the world is eating all of this junk. And
Oh yeah.
I think it should be a part of religion to say, well, hey, how can I eat to keep my body healthy? And that I think it can be uh I kind of compared it to like just as much of a sin as she would see other things like alcoholism,
Hmm.
drugs. These are addictive substances, and you can't put them down even though they're hurting
Hmm.
you. And it is
I
really
totally,
something to think
yes,
about.
I totally agree. I think that there's a tendency for Christians to focus on, okay, we shouldn't put these things in our mind, or we shouldn't look at these things, and we shouldn't watch these things because they're bad for us. But then we tend to just say food is fine. Like food, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's a standard thing at churches to have coffee and donuts. Like
Yeah.
donuts and candy and
Hmm.
sugar is just like understood to be fine. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Like that's ridiculous. Like I think it's ridiculous
Right.
if we have all these, non-religious or just spiritual people taking way better care of themselves than Christians. Like that doesn't make
Hmm.
sense. It's in scripture that we're supposed to, that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, and
Yeah.
that we shouldn't defile ourselves. And, you know, we're fooling ourselves if we think that it's
Yeah.
irrelevant what we eat. I think that's really sad, and it's a problem.
Yeah, another thing like I think about is when I was so sick, I was praying
Mm,
nightly, God, please
yep.
deliver me. Whatever I need to do, please save me from this hell, because it was literal hell on earth.
Right.
And,
Me
it would have been
too.
so foolish of me to think I didn't need to do any work on my part, that I could just
Right.
go on,
Right.
keep eating all the junk. And I mean, miracles do happen, but I do believe meat heals, and I do believe that God brought that to me, that I was in the right
Mhm.
place,
Me
where He
too.
wanted me to
Yeah.
be, that I was able to learn about this. I tell people I do believe this is sent from God, that
I
I
say
learned
that
about this
too. Yeah.
crazy diet.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I feel like a lot of Christians will lean only on prayer, and I do feel like
Hmm.
that's enough, but you also need to pay attention to the signs. If you see something like a
Right.
crazy carnivore diet, just don't immediately dismiss it.
Right.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. I think we can tend to spiritualize everything instead of realizing there's concrete physical choices we can make right away, and to help ourselves. Yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the sugar and the grains and I ate a lot of keto junk foods probably that last year before I turned to carnivore. I was just so like eating for pleasure still. I found
Yeah,
keto
me
was
too.
a disaster. Um, yeah, because it was all about like the numbers. So then it was like, oh, well, this is okay because this isn't going to affect my net carbs, but it was just junk with whatever chemicals they put in there. And I mean, it made me pretty sick.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you weren't a strict carnivore, but what
Mhm.
all do you include in your diet now?
So I meant to mention my husband does it with me. So he's lost almost 30 pounds. So that's
Wow.
been cool. We don't know where the 30 pounds was because he didn't seem to be overweight, but it's amazing how much water weight and, weight you can lose on it.
Hmm.
So we eat mostly beef, some dark meat chicken, lots of pork belly, bacon, lots of butter. I've been trying to do high fat carnivore for the last couple of weeks, and I really like that. I think men and women are different, and that women need more fat, and that the whole, meat, salt, water thing that works for a lot of men is just not the best thing for women. The more I learned. So he doesn't seem to need as much fat as me, but he needs more protein. And then, so we do dairy. We like cheese. We do heavy cream. I love the carnivore ice cream recipe I got that from you on one of your interviews. And I was like, I have to try that. And it's so good.
Awesome.
And we drink coffee. So I get a lot of flack for that. But I mean, I'll just go ahead and admit I'm addicted to coffee. Like, I don't necessarily think it's the best thing, but we love our coffee. We love our espresso. I drink some Earl Grey tea. And I also haven't given up alcohol completely. So I do like a good bourbon or something like that. But I just don't put a bunch of junk in it or anything like that. I like pate a lot, especially right before my period. I'll crave it because it's like I need extra iron or something. And that's about it. I mean, we love steaks. We would eat ribeyes every day, but it's just too expensive. Oh, and we eat a lot of eggs. I love pastured eggs. I'm very picky about eggs. I like the good quality. So,
yeah.
And we use spices. So when I say I'm relaxed carnivore, it's because we use spices and drink coffee and occasional alcohol.
Okay.
But I don't touch salads, fruits. In fact, I did an experiment. I just got hired at a restaurant, and it's a new restaurant that's opening. And so usually when you work at a new place, you don't get the chance to try all the food. But because it's a new restaurant, they wanted the servers to taste everything on the menu. And I was too nervous to tell them, I can't eat anything. I'm carnivore, because I'm in Asheville, which is extremely vegan.
Okay.
And I was like, I just didn't want them to think I didn't take my job seriously, because I actually do take it seriously, and I love being a server. But I honestly, I'm just the kind of person that I can't recommend a dish or whatever if I haven't tried it. So I told my husband, okay, well, I'm going to suck it up, and I'm going to try all these foods on this. It's Italian. It's like classic Italian. And I said, let's see what happens. And so this was last week. And it was crazy. I mean, it was good that I did the experiment, because now I know I'm probably not ever going to stop doing carnivore. It was funny because I didn't feel like, oh, I get to cheat and I get to eat these delicious foods. I mean, of course, objectively, it was delicious, to try the homemade pasta and the, cannoli and the tiramisu. Like, my taste buds were like, okay, that's really good, but I did not take any pleasure in actually eating any of those, tasting any of those things. I didn't take any more pleasure in it than I do in the food that I eat every day. I mean, I honestly feel like carnivore is the most delicious, satisfying, way of eating. Like, I enjoy it more than I enjoyed those things, which is hilarious to me. And I did not feel good. Like, I did not feel good. It took about till the next day 2, because it was for 4 days. We had to try everything. And by day 4, I was so sick. Like, I felt so bloated and sick. I don't know how to explain it. I was nauseous, and it was confirmation that this is not nutritious. It was delicious, and it's high quality. And, I will happily serve these people that want to eat it, but, I can't do it.
Yeah. I'm happy you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you about that, because I remember being a server and people would say, well, what would you recommend this? And And I was wondering, if they're like, well, what salad is the best? If you would be like, actually, I do
I
not touch
know.
vegetables.
I know, and you can't say that because I just don't think
Mhm.
that it's appropriate. And I really don't want everybody in this restaurant to know that I'm a carnivore because it's just people don't understand.
Right.
And I don't want to answer questions, which is the
Right.
funny part is that I was totally like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to suck it up and eat everything. And then I'm sitting there, and this girl across from me is a vegan. Well, apparently, some people in the restaurant started talking about the fact that she was a vegan. And so the management heard that she was vegan, and they had the kitchen surprise her with a pasta that they made vegan for her, with vegetables and tomato sauce. And they brought it out when we were eating all the food, and they said, we didn't want you to be hungry. We wanted you to have something to eat. And she was about to cry. She was so excited. But I noticed that like nobody was like, making her feel uncomfortable that she was vegan. Like I thought that was cool.
Mhm.
Everybody was very cool about it. But I just knew that it would not be like that if I told my manager that all I eat is meat and I can't have vegetable oils.
Yeah.
I
Because
just think
what are
there's
they
this
gonna
like,
do? Bring you out a big steak?
I know they're not going to bring me out a steak because servers can't have that. It's too expensive. But like, I think there's more acceptance of veganism, in especially where I
It's
live.
so healthy and it's so good
Yes,
for the earth.
because yeah, you almost look up to someone if they just eat vegetables and fruits or
Hmm.
whatever. That's the attitude, and then you look down on somebody that only eats, So I just didn't want to deal with that. So that's why I chose to do it. But I am just so happy to go back to like the way I eat because it just feels so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's so awesome that you and your husband are doing carnivore together because you've got that support system and you've got that carnivore buddy, wherever you guys go,
Oh
family
yeah.
events. Have you been to any events, family get-togethers, and since you've been carnivore?
Well, this will be our first like Thanksgiving and all that.
Oh
I
yeah, yeah, that is next week. Oh my
I
goodness.
know. How long have you been carnivore?
Oh, I think a year and a half. Let's see,
Okay.
June 2021. So yeah, like a year and a half.
Mhm. Yeah, we did have his family took us all out to our favorite restaurant when we lived in the town we lived in before this. And it was where we had our wedding reception and stuff. And actually that's a great restaurant for carnivores because it's all like steaks, wild game, like all these like, exotic meats.
Oh,
And then they just serve, potatoes and vegetables on the side, but it's just a great place for carnivores. But it was a little awkward because it was for my husband's birthday and then like his other brother's birthday. And their mom is Italian and she makes cakes for her kids, all her grown kids for each of their birthdays. She'll make their favorite cake. And so there was a little bit of an awkward moment when they realized my husband was not going to eat his birthday cake and was not interested because there's that little moment of like, oh, am I crossing a line? Am I disrespecting my mom? But he was trying to explain. She's very understanding, but his dad was a little bit like, well, why wouldn't you eat it? Your mom made it. And there's always that kind of um, little bit of a guilt thing. But uh, I've been really impressed with my husband because he was a big donuts and, you know, pasta guy. And he just,
okay.
yeah, I didn't believe he could stick with it. I was like, there's no way. Like when we go to your mom's house and she makes your favorite pasta that you're going to not eat it, but he doesn't eat it. So he's like, it's not worth it. I mean, he'll just instantly gain like 5 pounds. And, it's not like that when you're younger, but now we're in our 40s and it's just not worth it anymore. You have to suffer.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Yeah,
um,
there's a lot of family birthday parties in my family, like in the fall. So I've been to multiple back-to-back
mhm.
events with like birthday cake and ice cream. And it's funny because I get offered cake every time. And it was my dad's birthday, and he was like, "Oh, will you break a diet? Like I'm doing this, like it's part of my fitness plan or something." And I'm like, no, I can't. That stuff tried to kill me. And
Right.
he's like, okay.
I like to use the
But
example. Yeah, go ahead.
no, no, but I'm not tempted, and it's not like I feel like I'm missing out. It's like you said,
Right.
it's not worth it. It's not ever worth feeling like I did before.
Right. They don't have to live with the result, like with the symptoms afterwards. It's not just
Hmm.
oh, I'm going to eat this for 5 minutes. Like it's literally like could be like 2 days of misery. But I like to compare it to, people wouldn't say that to an alcoholic, like, oh, come on, you could just have this drink like the one time. It's not going to hurt you. Like, I think people don't think of it like that, but that is what it feels like, to me. Like, no,
Yeah.
that's just better if I don't eat this stuff. And you don't you
Hmm.
don't see it as food. I don't see it as food anymore. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, not at all. It's not food. Um, okay, so we talked about the hypersomnia, the anxiety, depression, PMDD. Are there any other unexpected benefits or additional benefits you wanted to bring up that you haven't talked about already?
Um, I had the thing where you don't get sunburned. That was the first summer. First summer I didn't get sunburned. Because I always get sunburned at the beginning of summer. So um,
Yeah.
that was cool. I didn't get any bug bites either. So I don't know what it is about it, but it definitely changes your body chemistry or something. Um,
Hmm.
I had I have better skin. My skin is clearer, softer. I noticed less wrinkles, like especially like my hands. I always thought my hands looked really old, and now they're less wrinkled and less dry. Um, what else? I had the increased muscle tone, and I don't work out or anything. It was just, oh wow, like you can see muscle tone on my legs and my arms, and that was kind of cool because I don't work out. It just appeared. So that's a really cool thing. Less cellulite. I lost some cellulite on the legs. Um, let's see what else. Oh, a big one. One of the things I was dealing with before carnivore that was really difficult was this ongoing inflammation that I guess you would call it, they call it myositis or something. It's like
Mm.
inflammation of the muscles. Um, and I kept going to my doctor saying, I can't get rid of this tension that's in my shoulders and my back and my neck and my head. I said it just keeps like getting worse and it keeps spreading and just getting so intense that I'm starting to spaz out. And we thought it was the stress that I was going through because my husband and I have been going through one of the most stressful life events for, I'd say, a year and a half now. Um, an ongoing custody battle with my ex-husband. And I just can't tell you the amount of stress it's been. But that's what I thought it was. You just think, okay, it's the stress. But I was frustrated because I would tell my doctor, but I'm okay right now. Like I'm not stressing out about it. Like I think everything's gonna be okay. And then I still have all this tension. And so she told me to go to the to get massages because I told her I was going to the chiropractor, every week. And this stuff costs money and you're already going into debt with this like legal fees. And I was really stressed out. Like, well, I don't want to go to get massages. Like that sounds nice, but that's expensive, and I'm already paying for the chiropractor and we're paying for the lawyer. And it's starting to get out of hand. And that still wasn't enough to help the pain. And so finally she said, I don't know this. She said, this is so intense, this tension. She's like, I'm just going to prescribe you muscle relaxers. So I was like, oh, great. So I go to pick them up at the pharmacy and the pharmacist said that she couldn't give them to me because they would interfere with one of my other medications because I was on
Mm.
the sleep pill thing, and then I was on the Zoloft, and she's like, I'm sorry, but it's too risky. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how does this my life? So I couldn't take the muscle relaxers. But I mean, it was difficult, like, to walk around in that much pain and being tense all the time. It's not healthy. And the carnivore completely got rid of that. Like, it just went away. And it was like, I just woke up one day and I was like, wait, all that muscle tension that was like all over my body and making my head feel like it was going to explode is gone. Like, that was amazing. So that was one of the
Wow.
biggest. Yeah.
Yeah, that is big. Um, well, I have one last question to ask you before you go.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to someone just starting out on carnivore or just thinking about giving it a try?
Usually my advice is to not be afraid of the uncomfortable kind of withdrawal that you might have from eliminating carbohydrates. Um, I think it's a good idea to go slow, to maybe not go overnight. I know some people can do that,
Mhm.
but it can be a real shock to your system. And I just think if you're prepared for the worst, then you can get through it. But I think I've just noticed with people that have tried to do lower carb or have tried carnivore, I think they give up too soon. That's a common thing I've noticed. Um, I don't personally think 30 days is ideal. I think everyone should try it for 60 to 90 days. I just
Yeah.
think that's smarter, because I think if you have a long transition period and then you stop at 30 days, you probably didn't get all your benefits in to see really accurately like how you could feel. So I recommend 60 to 90 days, and don't be afraid if you start to feel worse before you feel better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And use
Yeah, that's
electrolytes.
great. Yes, electrolytes. That's great advice. Um, well, thanks again for meeting with me today, talking about your journey, and
Thank you.
being a great interviewee.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Until next time, stay meaty, stay strong, and stay inspired. Do you have a carnivore story to tell? Connect with me on Instagram at meet, MEAT, Mrs. MRS Grubs, GRUBS. I would love to interview you, and the world needs to hear your story and how meat heals. Thanks so much for watching and all your support. Bye-bye till next time.